Some dinners change nothing. But one quiet night at a small American diner changed everything for an Army general, her shy young son, and a humble single-dad janitor with a past no one could have imagined. What began as a simple request for a different table soon unraveled into a story of courage, compassion, hidden wounds, and a moment of fate so unexpected no one in that diner would ever forget it. Stay with us, because what the general did next stunned everyone. Before we begin, if you enjoy heartwarming stories about kindness, healing, and the quiet heroes among us, feel free to subscribe to our channel. It helps us bring more meaningful tales to you. Thank you for being here with us. The neon glow of Ellis Creek Diner flickered softly against the darkening Virginia sky, casting a warm, nostalgic haze across the parking lot. Inside, the modest bustle of clinking silverware and low conversations created a familiar hum, the kind of American comfort sound that wrapped itself around weary souls. General Harper Ellington, still in her crisp Army service uniform, after a week of grueling meetings at the Pentagon, pushed open the diner door with a gentle exhale. Her son Emmett held tightly to her hand. The boy's sandy hair fell in soft waves, neatly combed, though Harper noticed the way he fidgeted with the sleeve of his blazer, the only sign of nerves he ever showed in public. This was supposed to be a quiet dinner, a mother's attempt to reconnect after too many nights spent under fluorescent strategy room lights. She wanted Emmett to feel seen, safe, loved. But the boy's eyes drifted across the diner and locked onto a scene she never expected would change their lives. At a booth near the far window, beneath the warm glow of a vintage table lamp, sat a man in a faded green work shirt. His long chestnut hair brushed his shoulders, and a gentle smile tugged at his lips. Brandon Hale, though Harper did not yet know his name, was leaning slightly toward a little girl about Emmett's age. The child giggled softly as he twirled spaghetti on her fork, guiding her small hands with patient warmth. There was something luminous about them, a simplicity, a purity, a quiet beauty like a slice of life untouched by the harshness of the world. Emmett froze. Harper felt the stillness through his small hand, then watched, startled, as her son tugged gently on her sleeve. "Mom," Emmett whispered, "can we sit?" Near them. Near them, Harper blinked. Her son rarely asked for anything. Years of growing up under the structure of military life, her deployments, her rigid routines, her protective rules, had shaped him into a polite but guarded child. She'd tried to soften things, especially as he grew older, but parenting alone was its own battlefield. "Why there, sweetheart?" Harper asked softly. Emmett hesitated, then offered the smallest, most vulnerable truth. "Because they feel warm." The word struck deeper than Harper expected. She glanced toward the pair again. The man lifted a napkin to gently brush sauce from the little girl's chin, smiling with a tenderness so instinctive, Harper felt a surprising squeeze in her chest. Warm. Yes, that was the word. She inhaled slowly. "All right," she murmured. "Let's sit near them." But Emmett shook his head. "No, Mom. I want to sit with them. Please." The request stole her breath. Emmett didn't attach easily. He didn't initiate social interaction. His world was small, carefully shaped by Harper's need to protect him from the instability military children often endured. And yet here he was, drawn toward two strangers, with a certainty that made her heart ache. It was irrational, unexpected. And for Harper Ellington, whose life revolved around protocol, hierarchy, predictability, this moment felt like stepping off a familiar map. But something inside whispered, "Listen to him." So she nodded. "Let's ask them." Brandon looked up the moment their shadows fell across the booth. His eyes were a deep, steady hazel, the kind that carried both kindness and storms weathered long ago. He straightened instinctively, posture erect in a way that spoke of military training, despite the janitor uniform shirt. "Hi," Harper began, suddenly aware she was still wearing full dress uniform. People often reacted to the rows of ribbons that distinguished badges, but Brandon only offered a respectful nod, not intimidated, nor overly impressed. "I'm Harper," she continued. "This is my son, Emmett. He was wondering if he could sit with you and your daughter." Bella looked up at Emmett with wide, curious eyes. Brandon's smile softened. "Well, he said I think Bella here would be happy to make a new friend. Wouldn't you?" Bella nodded vigorously. Emmett's shoulders relaxed for the first time all evening. Harper felt herself exhale. She slid into the booth beside Bella, letting Emmett sit near the window beside Brandon. It was an odd seating arrangement, unplanned, yet somehow natural, as if the children had assigned seats based on instinct alone. Harper studied Brandon discreetly. His hands were rough, calloused in a way that suggested hard work. Yet the gentle way he guided Bella's fork spoke of a different man beneath the surface, one who understood wounds and how to mend them. "You on duty tonight?" Brandon asked, nodding lightly toward her uniform. "No, just dinner." Harper tried to relax her shoulders. "It's been a long week, Pentagon week." His tone was casual, but the accuracy surprised her. "How did you?" Brandon shrugged lightly. "Only place that keeps generals past midnight these days." His eyes flicked to hers, almost apologetic. "Sorry. Old habit. I notice things." Harper tilted her head, intrigued despite herself. "And you work. Here in town, maintenance at the middle school." He smiled as Bella reached for her juice. "Work I can leave behind at the end of the day. That's enough for us." Something unspoken passed between them two single parents, carrying different kinds of burdens, meeting in an unexpected place. Then it happened. A moment so small yet powerful enough to shift the ground beneath their feet. Emmett laughed, not a polite chuckle, not the quiet smile he usually reserved for Harper, but a full, bright laugh, the kind he hadn't made in months. Bella had said something silly. Brandon joined in, and Emmett blossomed beside them like a flower, turning toward sunlight he didn't know he'd needed. Harper's heart clenched. Her son was happy. Really, truly happy. And she knew with a clarity that stole her breath that she was witnessing a moment she could never have orchestrated, something organic, something life-giving. She met Brandon's eyes. He offered a small, understanding smile. In that instant, Harper made a decision completely out of character. She stepped willingly into a world outside her rank, outside structure, outside everything familiar. She did the unthinkable. She stayed. And the quiet diner, once just another stop in her long week, became the beginning of something she couldn't yet name, but felt deeply would change everything. The soft golden light inside Ellis Creek Diner grew warmer as the evening deepened, like the world had decided to dim everything else, so this small booth could glow a little brighter. The waitress brought another basket of cornbread, a pitcher of water, and a knowing smile, the kind older Americans gave when they saw something good unfolding, without needing to understand the details. The booth had changed. No longer two separate families eating in parallel lives. Now, it was four souls sharing warmth across invisible bridges. Bella and Emmett, seated side by side, had already slipped into the effortless connection that only children still untouched by cynicism could achieve. Bella showed him how she twirled spaghetti like Daddy taught me tiny fingers clumsily looping noodles. Emmett tried to imitate, failed adorably, and Bella clapped as if he'd accomplished something monumental. "Almost," she giggled. "Try again." Harper watched the scene with a quiet sense of disbelief. Emmett didn't usually warm up to strangers. Years of schedule structure and constant moves had shaped him into a reserved child. She'd always feared she'd carved too much discipline into his world and too little spontaneity. But here, with Bella, with Brandon, Emmett was different. He was free. Harper folded her hands on the table, trying to ground herself in the unfamiliar emotion rising inside her. Gratitude. Longing. Something else she wasn't ready to name. Meanwhile, Brandon Hale observed the children with subtle pride. Every so often he glanced at Bella like a compass, checking its true north. Harper noticed the way he relaxed whenever she laughed, as if the sound itself stitched something inside him. When Brandon finally looked at Harper, his voice was soft but steady. "Your son's got a good heart," Harper offered a small smile. "He's careful with it." Brandon nodded like he understood exactly what she meant. Kids who grow up around uniforms usually are. His gaze dipped briefly to her decorated chest. Lot of weight on those little shoulders. The observation hit home. She wanted to ask how he knew that truth so well, but before she could, Bella pushed a breadstick toward Emmett like a peace offering. "You can have mine. Daddy says sharing makes food taste better." Emmett blinked, stunned by the generosity. Harper leaned in gently. "What do you say, sweetheart?" "Thank you." "Bella," he murmured, cheeks pink. Bella beamed. "You're welcome. Want to see my bracelet?" The two children bent over the tiny charm bracelet, like it held the secrets of the universe. Their heads nearly touched. Harper felt something shift, a soft internal click. A bridge. Not just between the children, but between the adults, too. A fragile but undeniable thread. She cleared her throat lightly. "Your daughter is very sweet," Brandon chuckled. "She's the better half of us." Harper raised a brow. "She's only 6, and already smarter than me in most things." The self-deprecating humor spoken without bitterness disarmed her. Many people shrank in her presence, intimidated by rank or uniform, but Brandon spoke to her like an equal. Not disrespectfully, not arrogantly, just normally, like a human being. It was unexpectedly refreshing. Their moment was interrupted when a tall, sharply dressed man at a nearby table tossed down his napkin and scoffed loudly. "Oh, for God's sake," he muttered, voice dripping with disdain. "They let anyone in here now, don't they?" Harper stiffened. So did Emmett. Bella looked confused. Brandon didn't react at first, not visibly, but something in his posture changed. A slight straightening, an instinctive brace. Harper recognized it. Military bearing disguised in civilian clothes. The man sneered openly at Brandon. "A janitor in this place." Wearing that, he gestured at Brandon's old green work shirt. Harper's jaw clenched. She opened her mouth to respond. But before she could, Emmett rose from his seat. The boy stood beside Brandon, shoulders trembling, but chin lifted. "Sir, you shouldn't talk like that. He's a good dad." Bella immediately hopped up beside Emmett, tiny fists balled. "Yeah, Brandon's the nicest person in this whole diner." Every conversation around them paused. The rich man blinked in surprise, thrown off balance by two children staring him down like a moral firing squad. Brandon gently placed a calming hand on Emmett's shoulder. "Hey, buddy, it's okay." But Emmett shook his head. "No, it's not." His voice quivered, not with fear, but with conviction. Harper's breath hitched. She had never seen her son speak to a stranger like that. Never seen him defend someone so fearlessly. Something inside her fractured, softening in a way she hadn't expected. Because Emmett wasn't just defending Brandon. He was choosing him. Choosing this moment. This man. This little girl. Choosing warmth. Brandon exhaled slowly and looked the rude man in the eye, not with hostility, but with quiet dignity that carried far more weight than anger ever could. "We're just having dinner, sir. No need for trouble." The man scoffed again, but this time with less confidence. His gaze flicked between the children and the general's uniform beside them. Realizing he was outnumbered morally, socially, and in sheer courage, he muttered something under his breath and turned away. The diner noise resumed, but the booth felt different. Harper looked at Brandon, unable to hide the mix of admiration and curiosity deepening in her chest. Most people would have snapped back at him. Most people aren't raising kids watching their every move, Brandon replied quietly. I want Bella to see me handle things the way I hope she'll handle life someday. Harper swallowed hard. That simple sentence revealed more character than any resume, rank, or medal ever could. Beside them, the children slid back into the booth shoulders, brushing as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But something had. A choice had been made. A bond had formed. A bridge had been built. The kind that didn't crack easily. Harper looked at Brandon, really looked, and felt a flicker of warmth she hadn't felt in years. Not attraction alone, not admiration alone, something deeper. Respect, recognition, possibility. And as Bella reached for Emmett's hand under the table, Harper knew the night was far from over. Fate had already begun its quiet work. The tension in the diner had dissolved back into its familiar hum, but the atmosphere at the booth lingered with a quiet electricity, the kind that follows after something meaningful has been shared, even without words. The children were happily absorbed in their own world, again trading sips of chocolate milk and whispering secrets only new best friends could understand. Harper was watching them with a faint smile when another sound entered the scene, subtle, rhythmic, soft. A breath, too shallow, too fast. She recognized it only because she'd fought through it herself after deployments, the beginnings of something. But she didn't place it immediately, not until Brandon said quietly, "You okay?" Harper opened her mouth to answer, and the world tilted. It wasn't dramatic at first, just a small sway like the diner floor shifted under her boots. She blinked hard, trying to steady the ceiling that suddenly seemed farther away. The temperature dropped. Her fingers tingled. The edges of her vision blurred. She told herself it was exhaustion. A long week, too little sleep. The stress of Emmett's unexpected emotional shift. But then her breathing faltered, and the warmth drained from her face. Mom Emmett's voice cracked. Harper reached for the table, but her hand slipped. The room spun like someone had pulled the diner into a slow, disorienting whirlpool. General Brandon said the first and only time he used her rank that night. Then everything happened fast. Her knees buckled, her breath caught, and before she hit the floor, strong arms caught her. Brandon moved with an instinct that bypassed conscious thought. 1 second, Harper was standing. The next, he had her in his arms, lowering her to the booth's cushioned bench with precise control. "Emmett, honey, step back just a little," Brandon said, calmly, impossibly calmly. He checked her airway, her breathing, her color. The motions were fluid, practiced, automatic, the kind of skill that doesn't fade with time. Bella stood, frozen, eyes wide with fear. Emmett stood beside her, trembling. Daddy, Bella whispered. "It's okay, sweetheart. Everything's okay." Brandon's voice carried a steadiness that calmed even the air around them. He gently lifted Harper's wrist. Her pulse was rapid but thready, her breathing too shallow, skin clammy. He didn't need instruments. He didn't need equipment. He just knew. "Hajong huyetne," Brandon murmured under his breath, then switched to English for the kids. "She's just low on sugar. She's going to be fine." A waitress hurried over. "Should I call an ambulance?" "Only if she doesn't respond in the next 30 seconds, Brandon replied, already grabbing a sugar packet from the table. "Warm water. Fast." The waitress sprinted. Brandon tapped Harper's cheek, gentle but firm. "Harper." "General Ellington, I need you to stay with me." Her eyelids fluttered, not fully conscious, but fighting to be. "It's okay," Brandon murmured. You're safe. I've got you." His tone had shifted no longer. Casual, no longer. The quiet single dad. It carried authority, confidence, knowledge, carved from years of battlefields he never spoke of. Emmett's breath hitched. Is she dying?" Brandon looked directly into the boy's terrified eyes. "No, she's not dying. She just needs help waking back up. And I'm right here." The boy clung to every word like a lifeline. The waitress returned with water. Brandon mixed in the sugar, quickly lifted Harper's head with practiced care, and let the liquid touch her lips. "Come on," he whispered. "Just a little. You can do it." Slowly Harper swallowed. Her breathing steadied. Color returned to her cheeks. The haze lifted from her eyes. She blinked up at Brandon, disoriented, vulnerable, confused. And then, their eyes met. Really met. It was a moment suspended above time, raw, unguarded, startling. Harper saw something she wasn't prepared for. Someone who had been here before. Someone who had held soldiers in his arms while telling them it would be okay. Someone who knew loss and how to fight it with everything he had left. "Brandon." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm right here." What happened?" "You fainted. You're okay now." She swallowed again, grounding herself. Brandon helped her sit upright, carefully supporting her back with one steady hand. "I'm sorry," she murmured, embarrassed. Brandon shook his head. "Don't apologize. Your body just asked for a break." Harper breathed in, slowly processing. The general in her wanted to regain composure. The mother in her wanted to reassure Emmett. The woman in her wasn't sure what she felt. All she knew was this: she had collapsed. And Brandon Hale had caught her before the world ever touched her. But the moment wasn't done. Her collapse had rattled Emmett in a way neither adult had fully realized. "Mom," his voice was small, too small. Harper opened her arms and Emmett rushed into them, but the tremor in his body didn't stop. His breaths came shallow, rapid, uneven. A panic attack. Brandon saw it instantly. He gently touched Harper's arm. "Let me help him." She hesitated only a second before nodding, trusting him in a way that surprised even herself. Brandon crouched to Emmett's level. "Hey, buddy. Look at me." Emmett tried, then broke sobs, shaking his small frame. Brandon placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, grounding him. "You're okay. Nothing bad is happening. Your mom is safe. You're safe." "Can you put your hand on my chest?" Emmett did. "Good. Feel how slow I'm breathing." Brandon inhales deeply through his nose, intentionally. Slow. "Just match me. Breathe when I breathe." The boy struggled, then synced. Tiny, inhale. Soft, exhale. Tiny, inhale. Soft, exhale. "That's it," Brandon said gently. "You're doing perfect." Emmett's tears slowed. His breathing steadied. His little body leaned into Brandon instinctively, like a lost soldier seeking shelter. And then, as if the world had turned a page, he whispered, voice trembling but sincere. "Uncle Brandon, please don't go." Harper's breath caught. Bella gasped softly. And Brandon closed his eyes because something in that small, broken plea struck a place inside him he'd boarded up long ago. When he opened them again, there was no hesitation left. "I'm not going anywhere, buddy," he said. "I promise." He didn't know it yet. Neither did Harper. Neither did the children. But this was the moment that sealed their fate. A single promise from a man who kept everyone he'd ever made. A single collapse that changed everything. The diner had not yet returned to normal. People spoke again. Plates clinked. Forks scratched across ceramic, but something in the air remained. Changed. Charged. Softened. Almost reverent. A moment ago, a general had collapsed. A janitor had responded like a field medic. 2 children had stood stronger than adults, twice their height. And now, at the center of it all, 4 lives were quietly being rewoven by invisible threads. Emmett still curled against Brandon's chest, breathed in slow, shaky rhythms, the remnants of panic clinging to him like static. Brandon kept his palm on the boy's upper back thumb, moving in small circles, an instinctive gesture Harper recognized immediately. It was the same motion seasoned medics used on soldiers too young to understand why their world had fallen apart. "Easy," Brandon murmured, voice steady, warm. "You're doing great. Just stay with me." That's it. Harper watched, unable to stop the tightening in her throat. Her son, her guarded, introverted, painfully careful son, had chosen this man. Not out of desperation. Not out of confusion. Out of trust. A trust that seemed to form the moment Brandon caught Harper before she fell. Or maybe earlier when he spoke to Emmett like an equal. Or maybe even earlier still, when he simply existed, with a gentleness Emmett had rarely seen in male figures outside of books. Harper placed a hand on Emmett's back, supporting him from the other side. "Sweetheart," she whispered, "I'm okay. I'm right here." Emmett didn't speak. He only tightened his grip around Brandon's shirt. Harper inhaled sharply, something between gratitude and heartbreak. Brandon glanced at her, and in that single moment, a profound understanding passed between them. This boy has carried fear he can't explain, and you alone have been trying to carry it with him. "Is he still breathing too fast?" Harper asked quietly. Brandon shook his head gently. "He's regulating." Panic spikes and then tapers. His heart rate's coming down. There was confidence in his tone, grounded knowledge, intuition built from experience. Harper studied him more closely. The calm, the posture, the precision. This wasn't the calm of a janitor. This was the calm of someone who had seen chaos, survived it, and learned how to bring others back from the edge. "Where did you learn to do this?" she asked softly. Brandon hesitated, not because he didn't have an answer, but because he was deciding how much to give. "Life," he finally said. "And a few bad chapters." Harper didn't push. Instead, she let the truth settle. This man had lived through something that carved both strength and gentleness into him. When Emmett finally loosened his hold, Brandon eased back just enough to look the boy in the eyes. "Hey," he whispered, "I need you to take one more deep breath for me." Emmett inhaled. "Good. Now let it out slow." The boy exhaled shakily. Then, without warning, Emmett threw his arms around Brandon's neck again. It wasn't panic this time. It was gratitude, relief, attachment. "Thank you." Emmett choked. "Thank you for helping my mom." Brandon froze. Not because he didn't want the hug, but because of the weight of it. Children didn't often cling to him like this. Bella. Yes. But another person's child, a stranger's. He held the boy for a long, grounding second. "You did the brave part, buddy," Brandon murmured. "You stayed." Harper felt something inside her crack open. She wasn't used to being the one protected. She wasn't used to being the one caught. And she certainly wasn't used to someone comforting her son better than she could in a moment like this. Bella tugged at Harper's sleeve. "Is Emmett okay?" Now Harper knelt to the girl's level. "He will be. Thanks to your daddy." Bella nodded solemnly, sliding closer to Emmett, with a tenderness only children possess. "I was scared too," she whispered. "But Daddy always knows what to do." Harper looked at Brandon again. Really looked. She saw the edges of fatigue under his eyes, not from the moment, but from years. She saw the muscles that held tension even when he was still. She saw a man who had carried burdens too heavy for one person, and yet still had enough heart left to carry someone else's child without hesitation. A janitor did not move like that. A janitor did not diagnose collapse within seconds. A janitor did not coach panic attacks out of a shaking child with the precision of a trauma specialist. Brandon Hale was not who he appeared to be. The question wasn't if he had a past, but how deep it went. As Emmett's breathing stabilized fully, Harper slid into the booth with them. She placed her hand over her son's, grounding him further. Brandon maintained a respectful distance, now giving Harper space to reclaim her role. But Emmett wouldn't let go of his hand. Harper didn't miss the way Brandon froze again this time, with something like conflict on his face, as if this simple gesture stirred memories he wasn't prepared to relive. "You're safe," Brandon said, again, softer now. "Your mom's tough. I've seen soldiers twice my size faint after long weeks. She's just human." Harper huffed a gentle laugh. "Most people don't call generals human." "I don't look at uniforms first," Brandon replied. "Never have." The words hit somewhere deep. Somewhere Harper had sealed off long ago under medals' expectations and armor of her own making. Emmett tugged Brandon's sleeve. "Can you stay with us, just until we finish dinner?" Brandon blinked, surprised. Then he looked to Harper, the general. The woman used to making decisions that affected battalions found herself unable to speak for a moment. She finally nodded. "I'd like that," she admitted. "If you're willing." Brandon's expression softened. "I'm here." 3 words. Simple, steady. And exactly what Harper didn't realize she needed to hear. As they settled back into the booth, the tension slowly unwound. Bella leaned against Emmett, as if the fear from minutes earlier had never existed. Emmett clung to Brandon's sleeve with quiet assurance, and Harper felt something inside her shift in a way she couldn't quite define. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't infatuation. It was deeper. A recognition. A connection. A spark of fate knitting itself into place. A single collapse had opened a door neither of them knew existed. A single man had stepped through it with the steadiness of someone who'd once saved lives for a living. And a single child's whispered, "Uncle Brandon," had changed the shape of the night forever. What none of them realized yet, not fully, was that this was only the beginning. The private room at the back of Ellis Creek Diner was small, barely large enough for a corner table, 2 bench seats, and a window that looked out onto the quiet street. Usually, it was reserved for birthday gatherings or anniversary dinners. Tonight, the waitress had offered it simply because Harper Ellington still looked pale, and Brandon Hale had insisted on giving her a space away from the crowd. Harper didn't argue. She didn't have the strength to. Emmett sat close beside her, still holding her hand, as if afraid she might vanish. Bella clung to Brandon's side wide-eyed but calmer, now sensing that the storm had passed, but still needing her anchor near. The door closed behind them with a soft thud. Silence filled the room, not awkward, not tense, but heavy with unspoken things. The kind of silence that follows a moment that changes people in ways they don't yet understand. Harper traced her thumb over Emmett's knuckles until she found her voice. "Thank you," she whispered. Brandon met her eyes. "You don't owe me that." "I do," she insisted, her tone firmer. "You took control of a situation I should have handled myself." "Generals collapse too," Brandon said gently. "You're human, Harper. Just like the rest of us." The way he said her name, steady, warm, without rank or distance, caught her off guard. Very few people addressed her so simply. Even fewer did it without fear or reverence. She inhaled deeply. "Still, you knew exactly what to do. Every step, every sign. You reacted before I even hit the ground." Brandon shifted, and for the first time that night, Harper saw something flicker across his face, something guarded, quiet, painful. A shadow. "Old training," he said. "Muscle memory." What kind of training? Harper pressed softly. Brandon didn't answer immediately. Bella looked up at him concerned. Emmett watched him too, sensing the shift. Finally, Brandon exhaled slowly. "I used to be a medic," he said. Not the clinic kind. The kind who jumped out of helicopters into places no one wanted to be. Harper's eyes widened. Special forces, she asked. His jaw tightened, not out of pride, but out of something else entirely. Close enough, he murmured. Attached to a team that handled situations. Rescue? Recon. Extraction. She leaned forward, studying him with the trained eye of someone who'd interviewed hundreds of soldiers, leaders and specialists in her career. Suddenly, his calm under pressure made perfect sense. His posture, his movements, his ability to assess a threat, his instinctive protection of the children. You weren't just a medic, Harper said. You were elite. Brandon looked away. That was a lifetime ago. Harper didn't push. Instead, she let the silence rest between them until Brandon continued on his own voice, low, steady, stripped of all pretense. I left the service 6 years ago, he said. Walked away from everything. My career. My team. The man I thought I was. Why? Harper asked gently. He swallowed hard. Bella rested her small hand on his arm. Brandon's gaze softened at the touch, then drifted into a place far away. There was a mission, he said. A hostage extraction. Bad intel. Wrong layout. We went in blind. Harper felt her stomach twist. She'd read reports like that. Too many. We found the hostages, Brandon continued, but not all of them made it out. He paused, breath catching. One of them was a woman, he said. A civilian aid worker. Brave. Sharp. Kind. Harper didn't miss the tremor in his voice. She was the person I was supposed to protect, he whispered. And I failed. Bella leaned closer, resting her head on his shoulder. Brandon placed a protective arm around her instinctively. Afterward, he said, voice cracking just slightly. I couldn't go back, couldn't trust myself with another life in my hands. So I took the one job where I thought I could do no harm. A janitor, Harper murmured. Brandon nodded. I needed something simple. Routine. Predictable. Something where no one's life depended on me. Emmett stared at him with wide, earnest eyes. But you helped my mom. You helped me. Brandon's throat worked. He brushed a loose curl from Bella's face before answering. That's different, he murmured. That wasn't combat. That was just a moment. No, Harper said quietly. It was instinct. Training. The kind you don't forget unless you're hiding from it. Brandon stiffened, not in anger, but in recognition. Harper had struck truth. She leaned forward. You didn't fail that woman, she said gently. He looked up sharply, ready to argue, but Harper held his gaze. We all lose people, she whispered. Sometimes, despite everything we do. The burden isn't the failure. It's believing you were meant to carry that weight alone. Brandon swallowed tightly, unable to speak. Harper continued, voice soft but unwavering. You saved lives most people never knew were in danger. You carried soldiers out of fire. You stood exactly where others were afraid to stand. And you think one tragedy defines you. Brandon's hands curled into fists. He didn't interrupt. Harper leaned closer. The uniform doesn't make the man, Brandon. The heart does. And yours? She glanced at Bella, then at Emmett, then back to him. Is the kind that protects even when it's breaking. Brandon finally looked away, blinking hard, not out of weakness, out of the overwhelming weight of being seen after years of hiding. Emmett reached across the table and placed his small hand on Brandon's. Uncle Brandon, he whispered. You didn't fail. Brandon let out a shaky exhale. Bella climbed into his lap without asking and hugged him tightly. And there, in the quiet of that small diner room, something inside Brandon Hale cracked open, not with pain, but with release. A past he'd locked away for years had finally spoken, and someone had finally listened. After a long moment, Harper's voice broke the silence, gentle, steady. Brandon, you don't have to carry any of this alone anymore. He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time since the night began, the guarded shadows in his eyes lifted just enough for her to see the man behind them wounded. Yes, but still reaching for light. What none of them realized yet was that revealing his past wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. The quiet of the private diner room had settled into something almost sacred. Harper felt lighter than she had in months, despite her recent collapse, as if speaking with Brandon had opened a window somewhere deep inside, letting long, stale air escape. But peace never lasted long in the life of an army general. Just as Bella curled closer into Brandon's side and Emmett relaxed against Harper, the door swung open abruptly. A gust of cold air rushed in with Major Reed Harper's longtime aide and one of the few officers who knew her personal emergency contact. His expression was tight, urgent, and wrong. "General Ellington," he said, breathless. "There's a situation." Harper straightened immediately, the leader in her snapping back into place. Brandon also shifted subtly, the way a man trained to recognize threat did instinctively. Reed stepped fully inside and closed the door behind him. "I'm sorry to interrupt your evening, Mom, but you need to see this." He pulled out his tablet and held it toward her. On the screen was a video, a shaky recording from someone sitting inside the diner, a clip of Harper collapsing, Brandon catching her, Emmett crying, Bella's frightened face. It was already posted online. 57,000 views. Harper's blood chilled. Reed continued, "Ma'am, a group inside the department is circulating this to suggest you're medically unfit to command. They're saying your health is unstable, that you fainted during classified meetings, that you're hiding conditions from oversight." Harper's jaw tightened. "Who's pushing it?" the deputy commander, Reed, said quietly. "Hendricks." Harper's breath stilled. Brandon noticed. "Hendricks?" he asked, voice low. "You know the name." Harper frowned. Brandon's eyes narrowed, not with suspicion, but with recognition that came from a place most civilians would never understand. "Hendricks used to oversee tactical intelligence branches," Brandon said. "He butted heads with anyone who refused to bend regulations for convenience." "If he wants your position," Brandon gestured to the tablet. "This is exactly the kind of move he'd make." Reed glanced sharply at Brandon, as if realizing suddenly this janitor knew far too much. Harper leaned forward. "Major, how far has it spread inside the Pentagon?" Reed exhaled. "Far enough that senior leadership is requesting an immediate health evaluation hearing. They want to see you tonight." Harper closed her eyes briefly. "Damn it." Emmett's small hand tightened around hers. "Mom, you're not sick." "Why would they say that?" Harper forced a smile for him. "Because some people want power more than truth, sweetheart." Brandon stood slowly from the booth, his presence suddenly different. Larger, more controlled, more dangerous. "Harper, can I see the clip?" Reed bristled. "Ma'am, with respect, I'm not authorized to share classified. It's a diner video," Brandon cut in, "not a military op. And if you want to know how deep this goes, you need someone who's been on the other side of psychological warfare." Reed blinked. "Psychological warfare?" Harper nodded. "Show him." Reluctantly, Reed handed Brandon the tablet. Brandon watched the video once, just once, and in less than 10 seconds, his expression changed from calm to ice-sharp focus, the same look he must have worn on missions where lives depended on a single detail. "Pause," he instructed. Reed did. Brandon pointed at the corner of the screen. "There. Whoever filmed this wasn't surprised. They aimed the camera before you collapsed." Harper frowned. "What are you saying I'm saying?" Brandon replied slowly, "that someone knew to record you." Reed's face blanched. "That's impossible." No one could predict the general would. They didn't predict the collapse, Brandon interrupted. They predicted an opportunity. Someone's been waiting for a moment to make you look weak, and when it came, they were ready. Harper inhaled sharply. Brandon continued, voice measured. Notice the angle low from the right side diner aisle view. Whoever filmed this was seated 2 tables away. Alone. Wearing a ball cap. Didn't look up when you walked in. Reed stared at him, speechless. Harper asked the only question that mattered. Brandon, what does that tell you? That this wasn't random, he said. And it wasn't civilian. The room went silent. Brandon set the tablet down carefully. Hendricks is building a narrative, he said. He's not just spreading a video. He's creating a psychological profile, unstable, general, overwhelmed, single-parent emotional liability. And he's seeding it through channels designed to reach the council before you can defend yourself. Harper's pulse quickened. You're saying he planned this? Brandon shook his head once. Not the collapse, but the attack. Yes, absolutely. Bella clutched Brandon's sleeve. Daddy, is the bad man going to hurt Miss Harper? Brandon softened, stroking her hair. He's not going to hurt anybody here. Then his voice shifted again, the soldier beneath the civilian rising. Harper, you need to get ahead of this. Fast. They'll call you into an assessment hearing. But you should know. He looked straight into her eyes. Hendricks won't stop until you're out. Harper's jaw worked, muscle tightening with a mixture of anger and clarity. She had survived war zones, political storms, and power plays, but this was different. This was personal. Targeted. Deeply strategic. Why now, she whispered. Reed cleared his throat. Ma'am, the new Army restructuring bill you proposed last month, Hendricks opposed it. It cuts his authority in half. Brandon nodded. So he wants you gone before the bill passes, and he's willing to weaponize your health to do it. Harper exhaled slowly, then turned to Brandon. Why are you helping me? She asked quietly. It was an accusation. It wasn't mistrust. It was vulnerability. Brandon looked at her for a long moment. Because he said, I know what it's like to be taken down from the inside. And because no one, especially not a corrupt officer, gets to use your son's fear as ammunition. Harper's breath caught. Brandon's gaze flicked to Emmett, then back to her. And, because I don't like bullies, for the first time since the video appeared, Harper felt something solid beneath her feet again. Not certainty, not safety, but a direction, a path. Brandon Hale was not part of her world. He had no reason to stand between her and a political ambush. But he did, and that changed everything. Reed cleared his throat. General, the council is convening in 2 hours. Harper met Brandon's eyes. Will you come with me? She asked, barely above a whisper. Brandon didn't hesitate. Yes. He didn't know it yet. Neither did she. But that single word would set in motion the unraveling of an entire conspiracy. The ride from Ellis Creek, diner to Harper's government vehicle, felt strangely quiet. Not because there was nothing to say, but because too much had changed in a short span of time. Outside, Virginia night stretched calm and cool, street lights flickering over the windshield in slow, thoughtful intervals. Inside, something delicate had formed among the 4 of them. Something none of them yet had the courage to name. Harper sat in the back seat with Emmett leaning against her side. His breathing had fully returned to normal, and the faint tremors from earlier had faded. Every few minutes, his fingers reached toward Brandon's sleeve in the front passenger seat, not grabbing, not clinging, just checking that Brandon was still there. And each time Brandon twisted slightly in his seat to give the boy a reassuring glance. Bella sat beside her father, small hands cupped around a tiny plush rabbit she carried everywhere. She wasn't talking much, which Harper recognized. was her way of processing the whirlwind of emotions. But every now and then, Bella peeked back at Harper with soft curiosity, and something like protectiveness. Harper wasn't used to being looked at with protectiveness. Not from anyone, especially not from a child. Halfway to the base, Harper finally broke the quiet. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. "I know this wasn't how you planned your night." Brandon gave a faint smile. Plans change. Harper studied him for a moment. His profile was strong yet gentle. A man who had lived through storms, but still chose kindness. A man marked by grief, but guided by purpose. A man who had stepped back into a world he'd spent years running from for her and for her son, without hesitation. "Brandon," she asked quietly, "is Bella okay after everything tonight?" He looked back at his daughter. Bella met his gaze with sleepy eyes. "We're good, Daddy." Brandon brushed her hair back with a tenderness that made Harper's chest tighten. "She's tougher than she looks," he said. "And she's used to unexpected things." Harper nodded. She understood that kind of resilience, the kind built not from comfort, but from surviving what life threw at you without warning. Emmett shifted his voice small. "Mom, can they come over tomorrow?" Harper blinked. "Tomorrow? Please," Emmett whispered. I feel better when Brandon's here." Brandon stiffened just slightly, the kind of reaction that came from being needed in a way he hadn't allowed himself to be needed in years. Harper gently placed her hand over Emmett's. "Sweetheart, Brandon might have work tomorrow," but before she could soften the decline, Brandon turned in his seat. "If it helps Emmett," he said quietly, "we'll come." Harper felt her breath catch. Bella perked up immediately. "Can we really, Daddy?" Brandon smiled at her. "Looks like we can." Harper's heart warmed deeply unexpectedly. "Tomorrow evening?" she asked. Brandon nodded once. "We'll be there." When the vehicle pulled up to the base gate, the MP saluted Harper before glancing curiously at Brandon and the children. It was a strange group to see stepping onto a secure installation at 10 o'clock at night. Harper stepped out with Emmett in her arms. Brandon followed with Bella clinging to his hand. The moment they passed through the gate, Brandon's entire posture changed. Not outwardly, not dramatically. But Harper noticed. A soldier always noticed another soldier. He scanned the area without thinking. Counted exits. Watched the movement of personnel. His back straightened slightly, the quiet presence of a trained operative slipping through the cracks of his ordinary dad facade. Harper found herself watching him more than she meant to. "Brandon," she said softly. "You okay?" He blinked and returned to himself. "Yeah, just muscle memory." Harper tilted her head. "This base brings back things." "No," he said. "It brings back the man I used to be." His honesty disarmed her completely. She didn't push further. They walked together toward the administrative building where tonight's emergency assessment would take place. On the way, Emmett and Bella walked ahead of them, tiny silhouettes in the lamplight, their hands intertwined, laughter soft, but steady, the pure sound of children who had forgotten fear for the moment. Harper slowed her steps, watching them. "They look..." She paused, unsure of the word. "Natural," Brandon offered. Harper nodded. "Too natural. Like they were meant to meet tonight." Brandon followed her gaze and exhaled through his nose, something vulnerable, almost wistful in his tone. "Kids have better instincts than we do." "About people?" Harper asked. "About where they're safe," Brandon corrected. "About who won't hurt them, who won't leave." The words hit her harder than she expected. They walked in silence for a moment before Harper spoke again. "When was the last time you spent an evening like this, with someone else's family?" Brandon's steps slowed. A long time. How long? He hesitated. Since before Bella was born. Harper looked at him with softened eyes. So, 6 years. 6 years, he confirmed. She absorbed that. 6 years without sitting at a table with another adult. 6 years without sharing a moment of peace with someone outside his daughter. 6 years of living in the shadows of a past that wouldn't let go. Her chest tightened with something she didn't dare name. "Brandon," she said softly. "You handled tonight better than anyone I know. Better than most officers. Better than half the medics I've worked with. You took care of Emmett like he was your own." He stopped walking. She turned to face him. "I didn't plan on any of this," he said. "Not tonight. Not the diner. Not your collapse. Not the kids connecting like they've known each other forever." He swallowed. "And I definitely didn't plan on." His words trailed off. Harper held his gaze. Didn't plan on what Brandon looked away, not out of fear, but out of honesty. Didn't plan on caring this much. Not this fast. The confession struck the air like a quiet lightning bolt. Not dramatic, not loud, but powerful enough to shift the gravity between them. Harper stepped closer just an inch, just enough to let him know she heard him. "I didn't plan on any of this either," she whispered. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, fragile but real. Before either could say more, Emmett turned back. "Mom Bella wants to show me the stars from your office." Bella waved both arms excitedly. Harper chuckled, shaking her head softly. "Looks like your daughter is taking over my base." Brandon smirked. "She tends to take over any place she walks into." Harper motioned forward. "Come on, let's keep the takeover quiet." They walked again, 2 adults and 2 children under the soft glow of military lights. 2 families, once strangers, now moving in unison. Not forced, not awkward, not temporary. Something was forming, something deep, undeniable, impossible to ignore. Harper felt it. Brandon felt it. The children reflected it. And as they entered the building together, steps in sync, hearts strangely aligned, neither adult realized how profound this night would become. They weren't blending into each other's worlds. They were building a new one. Harper Ellington's home was not extravagant. It was neat, disciplined, softened by warm lamps and framed photos of her and Emmett through the years. A few commendations hung near her study, but otherwise the house carried the quiet understatement of a woman who lived for duty, not display. Tonight, however, the atmosphere felt different, warmer, fuller, alive. Brandon had stepped inside gingerly, almost apologetically, holding Bella's jacket in one hand, as she pulled him forward with unfiltered excitement. Emmett followed close behind Harper, though every few seconds he glanced back just to make sure Brandon hadn't disappeared. The moment the door closed, Harper noticed it a shift. Like her house exhaled, the presence of 2 children giggling down the hallway, the soft rumble of Brandon's voice reminding Bella to remove her shoes, the way Emmett hovered near Bella trying to impress her with facts about constellations and army base codes. A home that had always felt just a little too quiet suddenly felt complete. Harper motioned toward the dining table. "I hope you don't mind something simple. I'm afraid tonight didn't leave much time for cooking." Brandon smiled. "Simple sounds perfect. We're not picky," Bella chimed in. "We like anything with cheese." Emmett nodded quickly. "Mom makes the best grilled cheese in the universe. Better than the cafeterias." Harper flushed with embarrassment at her son's enthusiasm. That might be an exaggeration. Brandon shook his head. "I'll take his word for it." There it was again, that gentle humor. The way he made her feel seen without judgment. The way he made the room warmer without trying. Harper cleared her throat, retreating toward the kitchen. "Make yourselves comfortable. It'll just take a few minutes." But Brandon didn't sit. Instead, he walked toward the doorway separating the kitchen from the living room and leaned a shoulder against the frame. "You need help?" he asked. Harper arched a brow. "You cook like a soldier," he said. "Efficient. Fast. Actually edible half the time." She laughed a small, surprised sound, the kind she hadn't made in too long. "Then yes," she said. "I could use the extra set of hands." Brandon washed his hands, rolled up his sleeves, and moved with an ease that surprised her. Every motion was purposeful, controlled, but soft around the edges, as if his strength was filtered through patience. Together, they assembled grilled cheese sandwiches, fruit bowls, and warm tomato soup. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't planned. But the simplicity of it, two adults in a kitchen working side by side as the children played, felt like something precious. Like something Harper had missed without ever realizing it. While the sandwiches grilled, Harper leaned against the counter. Brandon stood opposite her, wiping a knife clean. "About earlier," she said quietly. "The hearing. Hendrix. Everything. I shouldn't have dragged you into it." Brandon shook his head. "You didn't drag me anywhere. You could have walked away. I didn't want to." Their eyes met. And stayed. For several long seconds, the space between them hummed with quiet understanding, with something unspoken but undeniable. Harper felt warmth rise to her cheeks. She broke eye contact first, turning toward the stove. "You take care of people," she murmured, "even when it hurts you. Even when it costs you." Brandon looked down at the knife in his hand, turning it slowly. "I didn't know how else to be," he admitted. "In the field, you don't have time for doubts. You just act. You save who you can." "And who saves you?" Harper asked softly. Brandon's lips parted slightly. He didn't answer. Didn't have an answer, because no one had not for a very long time. Before Harper could speak again, the children burst into the kitchen. "Mom Bella made me a bracelet." Emmett proudly held up his wrist, displaying a small bracelet made from colored rubber bands, red, yellow, and blue. "It's to keep you brave," Bella announced. "Daddy says colors make your heart stronger." Harper knelt, smiling. "It's beautiful, sweetie." "Thank you, Bella." Bella beamed. "I made one for you too, Miss Harper. And one for Daddy." Harper's breath caught. A tiny rubber band bracelet, green and white, placed gently into her hand by a little girl who had only known her for hours. She swallowed hard. "I love it." Brandon smiled at his daughter, pride shining in his eyes. "You're spreading your magic again, Bells." "I'm helping Bella," said simply. "Like Daddy does." The room stilled. Brandon looked away, blinking. Harper felt her heart twist, a deep, aching, grateful twist. This man didn't just protect, he inspired. Every small act of kindness Bella showed had come from watching him. And Emmett. Harper glanced at her son, noticing how closely he stood beside Brandon. He wasn't just admiring the man, he was imitating him. And for the first time in years, Harper didn't feel afraid of someone stepping into that role. Dinner was simple, but warm. The kids chattered endlessly, from school stories to imaginary battles between stuffed animals. Bella animatedly described her pillow fort strategy, and Emmett eagerly outlined how he'd defend it using kid-sized army commands. Brandon watched them with quiet amusement. Harper watched Brandon with something much deeper. Halfway through the meal, Bella leaned her head on Emmett's shoulder. The boy froze for a second, then relaxed, and Harper nearly gasped at how natural it looked. "Are they always like this?" Brandon asked. "No," Harper said softly. "Not with anyone else." Brandon nodded. He understood. After dinner, the children coaxed Harper and Brandon into the living room, where they attempted to build a pillow fort together. Emmett drew map plans. Bella designated soft zones and danger zones. Brandon tied sheets between chairs. Harper knelt on the floor, helping them arrange cushions. There was laughter. Real laughter echoing through a home that hadn't heard it in years. And when the fort was complete, Emmett declared a rule. Only safe people allowed inside. Bella pointed at Harper. She's safe. Then at Emmett. He's safe. Then Brandon. She smiled. He's the safest. Harper froze. Brandon froze. And then Harper smiled. Not a polite smile. Not a formal smile. A real one. A smile that reached somewhere inside her that had been dormant for years. When it was time for Brandon and Bella to leave, Emmett hugged Bella tightly and then shyly hugged Brandon's waist. "Are you coming back tomorrow?" he whispered. Brandon placed a warm hand on the boy's shoulder. "I said I would," he answered. "And when I make a promise, I keep it." Harper walked them to the door. "Thank you," she said again, but the tone was different this time. Softer. More vulnerable. More hopeful. Brandon nodded. "Good night, Harper." She hesitated just a second before replying. "Good night, Brandon." When the door closed, Harper stood still for a long moment, her heart beating in a rhythm she hadn't heard in years. Two families hadn't just met tonight. They had begun to heal together. And none of them, least of all Harper Ellington, would ever be the same. The next evening arrived with the quiet tension of a storm waiting just beyond the horizon. Harper Ellington stood in front of her bathroom mirror, adjusting the collar of her uniform for the third time. Not because it wasn't already perfect. Harper didn't know how to be anything but precise, but because something inside her refused to settle. Brandon was downstairs with the kids. His voice drifted up the stairwell, warm, steady, gentle. Emmett's laughter followed. Bella's tiny feet pattered across the hardwood floor. Their three voices blended into a harmony that made the house feel brighter than it had in years. Harper caught her own expression in the mirror. She looked softer. And that scared her more than the hearing she was about to face. She exhaled, removed the tension from her shoulders, and stepped out of the room. Downstairs, Brandon was kneeling beside the children, helping them finish a puzzle of the solar system. Emmett leaned comfortably against his side, completely at ease. Bella sat cross-legged on the floor, her dark hair falling over her face as she concentrated. The moment Harper appeared at the bottom of the stairs, Brandon slowly rose to his feet. For a heartbeat, something electric passed between them, a thread of quiet understanding, unspoken but unmistakable. "You look ready," he said softly. "I have to be," Harper replied, though a flicker of uncertainty whispered beneath her tone. Brandon heard it. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Whatever happens in there, you're not walking in alone." She met his eyes, steady, grounded, unshakably loyal, and felt the smallest knot inside her loosen. Emmett tugged at Harper's sleeve. "Mom, you're going to be okay. We'll be right here," Bella added, with absolute certainty, as if her presence alone could repel an entire council of generals. Harper cupped their cheeks gently. "I know." But inside, doubt gnawed at her. Tonight wasn't about fainting at a diner. It was about power, politics, betrayal. And Hendricks knew exactly how to strike where she was most vulnerable. The base's command building glowed beneath harsh fluorescent lights. Soldiers, aides, and officers rushed in coordinated movements, but the moment Harper entered with Brandon at her side, whispers rippled through the corridors. A janitor walking beside a general. Who was he? Why was he here? Why did he move like he belonged? Harper ignored the murmurs. Brandon did too, though Harper noticed how his eyes skimmed the hallways, analyzing the space, the people exits. Instinctive, deliberate. Two soldiers opened the double doors to the hearing room. Inside, the senior counsel sat in half-circle formation. Uniforms pressed, medals gleaming, expressions unreadable. At the center stood Deputy Commander Hendricks, hands clasped behind his back, every inch of him radiating smug authority. Harper entered with her spine straight chin high. Brandon stood just behind her left shoulder, not overshadowing, not imposing, but unmistakably present. Emmett had asked him to stay close. Harper realized she wanted that too. The council chairman cleared his throat. "General Ellington, thank you for joining us. Given recent evidence of potential medical instability, we are required to assess your fitness for command." Hendricks stepped forward, tablet in hand. "If I may, Chairman," he said smoothly. "We've all reviewed the video circulating online. But the raw footage speaks even louder." He pressed a button. The lights dimmed. And there it was, the clip of Harper collapsing projected on the large screen behind the council table. The angle was crisp, the timing suspiciously perfect. The narration of online commenters, cruel, exaggerated, filled the room like poison. General Ellington Hendricks said, feigning concern, "Would you care to explain this incident?" Harper opened her mouth to speak, but Brandon stepped forward slightly, just enough for the council to notice. "Permission to address the room," Brandon asked. A ripple of confusion passed through the council members. Hendricks scoffed. "I'm sorry, who are you?" Brandon met his gaze calmly. Brandon Hale. Hale Hendricks blinked, annoyed. "And what authority do you believe you have in this room?" "No authority," Brandon said plainly. "Just the truth." The chairman held up a hand. "Let's hear him." Hendricks bristled. "Sir, this is highly irregular. He's not even military." "Not currently," Brandon corrected. Hendricks froze. "What?" Brandon stepped toward the screen, posture steady. "Play the video again." Slower. A council member rewound it. Brandon spoke as the clip rolled. First he said, "Notice the camera origin. Low angle. Positioned 2 tables away. Focused on General Ellington before the collapse." The council leaned in. "That is not the angle of a bystander reacting. That is the angle of a person prepared." Murmurs erupted. Hendricks stiffened. "That's speculation." "No," Brandon said quietly. "It's training." He pointed to the upper corner of the screen. Second frame 14. See the reflection in the chrome napkin dispenser. A man with a ball cap lifts his phone before the general loses consciousness. Reed, standing at the back, looked stunned. Harper felt her heart pound. Third. Brandon continued, "Listen carefully." He raised the volume. In the background of the video, a faint voice whispered, "Now." Someone had cued the recording. A chill swept the room. Brandon turned toward the council. General Ellington didn't collapse from medical instability. She suffered a mild hypoglycemic dip from exhaustion, fully treatable, fully manageable. He turned to Hendricks, eyes cold. But someone used that moment to stage a political ambush. Someone who wanted power more than truth. Someone ready with the camera and ready with the narrative. Hendricks's face reddened. "This is outrageous." Brandon cut him off without even raising his voice. "You overplayed your hand." The room froze. Brandon walked toward the table, stopping directly beside Harper, shoulder to shoulder. Hendricks wants General Ellington removed before her restructuring bill threatens his authority. And he's willing to weaponize a medical moment to do it. The council erupted in debate, voices overlapping, accusations flying, indignation rising. Finally, the chairman slammed his gavel. Enough. Silence fell. He turned to Hendricks. "Deputy Commander, do you deny coordinating the circulation of this footage?" Hendricks's jaw worked. I shared it with internal channels, but the intention was..." "Your intention," the chairman interrupted, "appears to be self-preservation." He gestured to the guards. "Escort Deputy Commander Hendricks out for formal investigation." Hendricks's eyes widened as 2 MPs grabbed his arms. "This isn't over," he snarled at Harper. "You think you can run the army without me?" Brandon stepped in front of Harper, just slightly, a small, subtle movement but protective enough to shut Hendricks's mouth. Hendricks was dragged out. The council turned to Harper. "General Ellington," the chairman said, voice softer. Now your fitness for command remains unquestioned. Consider your record intact." Harper bowed her head gratefully. The chairman then looked at Brandon. "And Mr. Hale?" "Thank you." Brandon nodded once, just doing what's right. But Harper knew better. He hadn't just defended her, he had saved her, in every way that mattered. As they stepped out into the hallway, Harper felt something shift in her chest, the undeniable awareness that what had happened tonight went far beyond a political rescue. It was a reveal, a turning point, a truth crystallized in crisis. Brandon Hale wasn't simply a quiet single dad or a janitor with a hidden past. He was becoming something far more profound. He was becoming hers. The hallway outside the council chamber was quieter than Harper expected. The echo of Hendrix's furious shouts still vibrated faintly in the walls, but the rest of the building had settled into an almost reverent stillness, as if acknowledging what had just taken place. Harper walked with steady steps, though her legs trembled just slightly beneath her uniform slacks. Brandon moved beside her, his presence grounding her more than she cared to admit. Emmett and Bella hurried a few steps behind, still buzzing with the electricity of everything that had unfolded. When they reached the end of the corridor, Harper stopped. Brandon stopped too because he could feel it. A moment was coming. Harper turned toward him, her breath unsteady but her eyes clear. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. "I know," Brandon replied, "and yet you did. I know that too." Harper exhaled, shaking her head, as if trying to make sense of something that defied logic. "You walked into a room full of generals, admirals, and political giants, with no badge, no rank, no authority, and brought down the man who's been trying to destroy my career for months." Brandon shrugged, though the hint of a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I've faced scarier crowds." Harper stepped closer. "Why Brandon? Why did you fight for me like that?" He looked at her, really looked. The hallway lights reflected in his eyes, revealing a softness that contradicted the steel he'd shown only minutes ago. "Because you're worth fighting for," he said simply. Harper swallowed. That shouldn't have affected her. Not after years of discipline. Not after years of guarding her heart like a classified operation. But the words struck her deeper than she expected. Before she could respond, footsteps echoed behind them. The council chairman approached, flanked by 2 senior officers. "General Ellington," he said warmly. "A few more minutes of your time, if you will." Harper straightened instinctively. "Of course, sir." The chairman's gaze shifted to Brandon. "Mr. Hale, please join us." Brandon blinked. "Sir, I'm not—" "Please," the chairman insisted gently. "You've earned your place in this conversation." The officers guided them back toward a smaller briefing room. Harper glanced at Brandon as they walked. His expression was unreadable, cautious, unsure, but steady. Always steady. Inside, the chairman closed the door and turned to Brandon. "We've reviewed your background." Brandon stiffened. Harper looked at the chairman sharply. "Sir." "It was necessary for security reasons," he continued, raising a hand. "And what we found was extraordinary." Brandon's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. The chairman stepped forward. "You were one of the most decorated combat medics in your unit. Your team led operations in some of the most volatile zones of the last decade. Your record shows bravery, precision, and a survival rate for wounded soldiers that borders on miraculous." Brandon said nothing. Harper's breath caught. She knew he was skilled, but she didn't know the extent. And then the chairman continued softly. "You disappeared from the system. Vanished. No misconduct. No dishonor. Just gone." Brandon finally spoke. "Because I failed someone." The chairman exchanged a glance with the officers. "No," he said firmly. "You didn't fail. Reports from your team unanimously state the mission had impossible odds. Every one of them said you saved more lives than should have been possible. Brandon clenched his fists, not hers. Harper stepped closer, her voice soft. Brandon. But the chairman continued. We're not here to reopen old wounds. We're here because tonight you demonstrated loyalty, courage, and strategic intelligence this army deeply needs. Harper's heart pounded. The chairman turned to her. General Ellington recommended you for a position months ago, someone to help her restructure tactical medical protocols across the force. Brandon's eyes widened. He looked at Harper, stunned. Harper swallowed. I didn't know how to bring it up. Not after I learned you'd left the service by choice. I didn't want to pressure you back into something that might reopen old trauma. The chairman stepped between them. So we're offering you this now, Mr. Hale. Not as a soldier bound by command, but as a civilian specialist with full advisory authority. A strategic emergency response consultant. Flexible hours, no deployments, no combat. Brandon stared at him, not breathing, not blinking, just absorbing. Harper watched him carefully. She knew what this offer meant. A chance for redemption, a chance to use his gifts again, a chance to heal from the very thing that broke him, but also a chance that could hurt if he wasn't ready. Brandon finally spoke, voice low. I can't accept unless Harper stepped closer, pulse quickening. Unless what Brandon swallowed. Unless I have your word that the work won't take me away from Bella. Or Emmett. Harper froze. The chairman raised a brow. That's a very specific request. Brandon met Harper's eyes directly. My daughter comes first, and Emmett, he needs stability. If this job takes me away from them, I walk. Harper felt a warmth bloom in her chest, deep, powerful, unexpected. Brandon, she whispered, I give you my word. Something unspoken passed between them, something soft and steady. The chairman smiled. Then congratulations, Mr. Hale. You have a new mission. Brandon blinked, then nodded slowly, as if accepting a weight placed long ago, but finally ready to carry again. When the door closed behind the officers, Harper and Brandon were left alone in the small room. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Harper stepped forward. You didn't have to include Emmett in your conditions, she said softly. Brandon looked down. I know. But you did. He lifted his gaze, and what Harper saw in his eyes made her breath stop. Care, commitment, something deeper than either of them had intended. He's a good kid, Brandon said, and he looks at me like I'm someone he can depend on. You or Harper whispered. Then, as if drawn together by something stronger than gravity, they stepped closer. Not touching. Not yet. Harper's voice trembled ever so slightly. I don't know what this is, Brandon. I don't know where it's going. Neither do I, he said. But I know what it feels like. What does it feel like? Brandon inhaled slowly, like coming home. Harper's breath caught. She closed the last inch of distance, their foreheads nearly touching. Stay for dinner, she whispered. Stay with us. For tonight. Brandon nodded, once the answer, immediate, instinctive. I'm already here. Outside the room, Emmett and Bella waited, two children standing shoulder to shoulder, unaware that the adults behind the door had just made a choice that would change the shape of their futures. A choice built not from duty, but from love, honor, and the quiet, steady courage that had brought their lives together. The sun was lowering behind the Virginia pines when Harper, Brandon, Bella, and Emmett walked out of the command building together. The sky glowed with hues of orange and rose gold, casting long shadows across the base. It should have felt cold, institutional, the kind of place where emotions were tucked away in locked drawers. But tonight felt different. Tonight, 4 people walked side by side, not as strangers, not as an officer and a civilian, not as two broken adults carrying the weight of separate battles, but as something quietly becoming a family. Harper inhaled the cool air, the weight on her shoulders, the political storm, the fear of losing her command, the guilt of fainting in front of her son had lifted, dissipated like fog in the morning sun. Brandon had done more than defend her. He restored her dignity, her confidence, her heart. As they approached the parking lot, Emmett slipped his hand into Brandon's without hesitation. Bella immediately grabbed Harper's hand as if claiming her too. Harper blinked at the feeling a child's hand in hers that wasn't her son's. Warm, soft, trusting. It flooded her with a strange, beautiful ache she hadn't expected. Bella looked up at her with bright eyes. "Miss Harper, can we come to your house again?" Daddy said. "Maybe we could if you say yes." Harper felt her throat tighten. She squeezed the girl's hand softly. "Sweetheart, you can come any time." Bella squealed and hugged Harper's leg. Emmett laughed, a free, joyful sound Harper hadn't heard often enough in his young life. Brandon watched the scene quietly. His smile was small, but full. Back at Harper's home, the warmth from the previous night lingered, as if it had never left. As the door clicked shut behind them, something settled in the air, gentle, inevitable. Bella ran to the living room to resume command of her pillow fort. Emmett followed, proudly explaining defense strategies he'd invented overnight. Their laughter echoed down the hallway, filling the house with a kind of joy Harper had only dreamed about. Brandon set his jacket on the chair, glancing toward the children. "They're acting like siblings already." Harper stepped beside him. "They are." Their eyes met, held. Harper lowered her voice. "Brandon, thank you. For everything. For Emmett. For tonight." For Brandon shook his head softly. "You don't have to thank me." "I do," Harper insisted. "You saved my career." "No," Brandon said gently. "You saved yourself. I just refuse to let someone lie about you." Harper exhaled slowly. Outside, the sky deepened to dusk. The house lights warmed to a soft glow. The scent of grilled cheese from last night still lingered, faintly mixed with the softness of home. "So," Brandon said, taking a step closer. "What happens now?" Harper swallowed. She'd faced war zones without blinking. She'd stood before congressional committees without flinching. But one step from Brandon Hale made her breath catch. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but I know what I want." Brandon tilted his head. "And what's that?" Harper's voice softened. "For you to stay. A beat. A heartbeat. A shared breath." Brandon's expression broke open a sudden raw vulnerability. "Harper, I haven't belonged anywhere in years." "You belong here," she whispered. "With us." The words trembled from her lips before she could stop them. Brandon looked toward the children playing, then back at her. "You're sure?" Harper nodded once, firm, steady, absolute. "Yes." Something shifted in Brandon's eyes, something deep. Recognition, relief, hope. Then Emmett's small voice echoed from the living room. "Mom, Bella needs help with the fort roof." Harper and Brandon both laughed softly, the sweet, unguarded kind of laughter that only existed between people who were finally safe. "Let's go help them," Harper said. "Together?" Brandon asked. She smiled. Together. The four of them rebuilt the pillow fort with renewed enthusiasm, Harper securing the sheet corners with military precision, Brandon reinforcing the pillars, Bella decorating the interior with stuffed animals, and Emmett creating a command center with walkie-talkies. When it was done, the children crawled inside and declared it the safest place in Virginia. Emmett poked his head out. "Mom, Brandon, small down." Harper blinked. "What inside the fort?" Bella nodded firmly. "Only safe people allowed." Harper laughed and glanced at Brandon. Orders are orders. They crouched inside clothes' warm knees, touching shoulders, brushing. The fort was cramped but cozy, filled with the sweetness of childhood imagination. The children snuggled between them, one on each side. A perfect symmetry. A perfect moment. Bella rested her head on Harper's arm. Emmett leaned against Brandon's chest. Harper looked at Brandon. Brandon looked at Harper, and in their eyes the truth formed. Silently. This is what home feels like. Later that evening, after the children fell asleep on a pile of pillows, Brandon lifted Bella gently into his arms. Harper carried Emmett upstairs. They laid the children side by side on Harper's wide bed until the guest room could be set up. Bella curled toward Emmett. Emmett's hand found hers without waking. Harper whispered, "They're perfect together." Brandon murmured, "They are." As they stepped quietly out of the room and Harper closed the door, Brandon paused in the hallway. "Harper," he said softly, "I didn't think I'd ever have this again." What she asked. A family. Harper's eyes shimmered, not with tears, but with understanding. She stepped closer. "Brandon, you do." His breath trembled. Then Harper said the words that sealed everything gently, courageously, vulnerably. "Stay. Not just tonight. Stay. With us. In our lives." Bella's words from the previous night echoed softly. "Miss Harper, Daddy says colors make your heart stronger." Tonight, Harper realized Bella had been right. Because standing in the hallway with Brandon, heart wide open, she felt stronger than she had in years. Brandon swallowed hard and whispered, "We'll stay." Not "I'll stay." "Will." A promise, not just from a man, but from a father. Harper leaned her forehead against his close, tender, full of unspoken warmth. Outside, the last light of the evening glowed softly through the windows. Inside, a family newly formed stood in the quiet together, held not by blood, but by kindness, courage, healing, and the miraculous timing of two hearts that had been waiting for each other longer than they ever realized. Before we close today's story, we'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Our community here on YouTube stretches across small towns, big cities, and quiet corners all over the world. And your comments mean more than you know. If you enjoy stories of kindness, courage, and quiet everyday heroes, feel free to subscribe to our channel. It helps us continue creating meaningful, heartwarming stories just like this one. And finally, thank you. Thank you for spending your time with us, for your support, and for sharing these moments together. We hope today's story brought a little warmth, hope, and peace to your day.